Hey there guys, I'm Crowe, the travelling scientist, here in Vancouver in British Columbia. Now last night I gave a talk in front of a live audience at the 2019 Pint of Science Festival. The talk was all about infectious diseases and how we can treat them and how we can vaccinate against them. It was super interesting, and the live recording didn't go so well, so I've actually re-recorded it. But I hope you enjoy it, so check this out.
He has his master's in pharmacology, microbiology, and immunology, but he chooses to spend his time roving the world and sharing stories about science with all of us. He hails from Australia, which is where he's visiting from. Thank you, Jesse, for joining us tonight.
G'day, I'm Crowe, the travelling scientist, here in Vancouver in British Columbia. I studied science at the University of Melbourne back in Australia. Yes, that's right, if you didn't pick it yet, I'm Australian. And I know, it's a miracle that I made it out alive. There are a lot of deadly animals in Australia. But that's not what I studied. I majored in microbiology and immunology, investigating a variety of microbes that are, well, microscopic. And I also studied pharmacology, lots of chemicals, drugs, and vaccines, which are also microscopic. So essentially everything I'm an expert in, you can't even see. But just because you can't see it doesn't mean that it's not actually there and that it can't hurt you. Bacteria, viruses, and other pathogens can infiltrate your body, bypass your immune system, and make you really sick. Or dead. But hopefully just sick. Luckily, some really smart scientists have done a lot of research and worked out how these microscopic bastards attack us, and worked out ways we can fight back. So just for fun, let's look at some of the more interesting pathogens, how they infect us, and what we can do to protect ourselves. Let's start with viruses. So, variola. Has anybody here had variola? Well, I should hope not. This virus causes the worst known human disease, even worse than the plague. It's called smallpox, and it's a blistery rash that spreads across your body, causing pain, fever, and in about 30% of sufferers, death. Smallpox is believed to have killed over 500 million people just in its last century on this earth. Luckily, this virus was officially eradicated in 1980, thanks entirely to vaccination. So you don't need to worry too much about this virus. But what about polio virus? It causes, well, polio, and the virus destroys nerve cells in your spinal cord, causing fever, weakness, and even paralysis, and it kills about 15% of sufferers. In 1988, the World Health Organization decided they were going to start trying to eradicate polio, and in that year there were 350,000 cases of polio reported. In 2018, there were only 33 cases of polio reported worldwide. That is a reduction of 99.99% in just 30 years.
A great success!
And if vaccination efforts continue, we can expect to see this virus eradicated like smallpox in the coming years. But you know another virus that was supposedly eliminated? Measles. And you know what's currently peaking around America and Canada? Measles. Measles virus was declared eliminated from USA in 2000, thanks to a highly effective vaccination program. But this year alone, there has been over 880 confirmed measles cases in 24 states across USA. And you might ask, why is that? Well, it's because people stopped vaccinating their children. If measles has been eliminated, what's the point, right? Well, the point is that the virus is still infectious in other parts of the world, and people travel. People can travel internationally. Furthermore, the measles virus is extremely contagious. If someone with measles just breathes near you, then that's enough to give you the infection. Luckily, measles isn't as deadly as smallpox or polio. It only kills 1 in every 1,000 people that get infected. But it's still a vicious disease that causes a fever, rash, cold-like symptoms, and it can even lead to complications like panencephalitis, where your brain swells up and you die. Well, that only happens in about 1 in every 100,000 cases, but it still happens. So let's keep vaccinating against measles and try to eliminate this disease for good. Now to something a little more deadly, Ebola virus. It causes a hemorrhagic fever where the insides of your body start breaking down and you start bleeding from within. And this disease kills approximately 50% of sufferers. It's a really deadly disease, which is actually great. Well, okay, not if you have the disease. I imagine that wouldn't be so great. But in terms of transmission, the reason this horrible disease is only infecting people in sub-Saharan Africa is because it acts so fast that it usually kills the host before it has a chance to spread to other humans. Let me tell you where Ebola actually came from. It's usually only found in animals, fruit bats, gorillas, and chimpanzees, and whatever this thing is. But when you live in rural Africa, you don't just go down to IGA and buy yourself some dinner, you go to the jungle and you find it. So African people go out hunting to find dinner for their family, and sometimes they come back with a gorilla or a chimpanzee. Now, if that animal is infected with Ebola, unfortunately now the whole family is going to be infected. So thanks a lot, Dad. Now, Ebola's been around since the 1970s, but due to its locality, nowhere near USA, and its rapid mortality rate, the vaccine production has not really been a high priority. But with the media attention it's been getting and the increasing number of outbreaks that are occurring as domestic and international travel becomes more accessible, a recently developed vaccine is currently being used and it's said to be 97.5% effective. So this is going to be a great help in preventing future outbreaks of this evil virus. Speaking of viruses that are too deadly to spread, here's one that I hope you never have to encounter. Rabies. Rabies kills 55,000 people every single year. This virus is spread by dogs and bats and cats and other types of animals. And if they're infected and they bite you, you get this virus which moves into your neurons and slowly travels up towards your brain. Luckily, it travels slow, like really slow. It moves at a rate of about 4 centimeters per day. So if you notice that you've been bitten by a rabid animal, you can go and get the vaccine which stops the virus in its tracks. If you don't get the vaccine and the rabies virus reaches your brain, it takes over your body, making you confused, aggressive, you start salivating, and then you have a massive seizure and you die. Now, the mortality rate of rabies is nearly 100%. And of all the people in history who have been infected with rabies virus, only 6 have survived. Just 6. This is thanks to the Milwaukee Protocol, which involves putting a patient into a deep coma and pumping them full of antivirals. And when this happens, their survival chances are increased from 0% to a whopping 8%. Hey, it's better than nothing. But the point is that we have an effective vaccine for rabies. So those are some of the more deadly viruses that are out there. But if you avoid getting bitten by rabid animals and you avoid eating gorillas in sub-Saharan Africa, you should be fine. Now let's talk about some interesting bacteria. I want to start by looking at Clostridium Tetani, a bacteria that lives in soil, which, is pretty much everywhere. And they survive for a really long time by producing spores, which scientists have playfully described as drumstick-shaped. Finger licking good, right? So these spores, or drumsticks, are super resistant to their environment. They become dormant and they can live for months, years, decades, centuries. There are bacterial spores that can live for over 10,000 years. So, these guys are tough. But who cares, right? They aren't hurting us. Are they? Well, when Clostridium tetani gets into a wound, the spore comes back to life and it releases a toxin called tetanospasmin. This toxin is extremely potent. A lethal dose is just 2.5 nanograms per kilogram of body weight. That means a tiny amount of this tetanospasmin, and you're dead. The toxin is taken up into the nervous system where it blocks the release of inhibitory neurotransmitters, so your nerves aren't inhibited. None of them. And your muscles start spasming, your jaw locks up, your lungs stop breathing, and you die a slow and agonizing death. Well, that was the case until the 1920s when a tetanus vaccine was produced. Nowadays, we all get the tetanus vaccine on the off chance that if we encounter this bacteria, if we get those drumsticks inside of us, not like that, but if we get infected, our immune system is ready to inhibit the toxins before they, kill us. But like with most diseases, our immune memory goes away over time. So we need to get a tetanus booster vaccine every 10 years. For example, if you can play a song on the piano, but then you didn't play the piano for 10 years, you'd probably need to practice again before you could perform that song, right? Well, it's the same for your immune system. It needs to be reminded every now and then if you want it to work at its best. So my question to you is, are you up to date? If you're not up to date, or you're not sure if you're up to date, ask your doctor next time you see them. Now, related to Clostridium tetani is another bacteria called Clostridium Botulinum. Now, this bacteria produces the most potent toxin that humans are aware of. It's more toxic than the red-backed spider, the blue-ringed octopus, the box jellyfish, the brown snake, or even the coastal taipan. Now, coincidentally, all of these deadly animals are located only in Australia. And furthermore, all of them can be found within about a mile of my house. So, consider yourself lucky if you don't live here. This bacteria, Clostridium Botulinum, makes the most deadly toxin that we know of. And then some evil genius came along one day and said, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna inject this toxin into people's faces, and they're gonna pay me to do it. And she changed the world. That's right, Botox, that chemical that people inject into their faces in an attempt to look younger, is crazy deadly. And actually, the inventor of Botox as a treatment was a female. Power to women. She was also Canadian. Power to Canadian scientists. Finally, she is still a practicing doctor here in Vancouver. And, I got in touch with her and asked her to come down to this live talk so we could give her a round of applause. And, well, she didn't respond to my email, so thanks a lot. But anyway, her name was Dr. Jean Carruthers, and she is an inspiring evil genius. Anyway, another bacteria I just wanted to touch on briefly is called C. Trachomatis. Now, this bacteria can only replicate inside of animal cells, so it wants to be inside of us. But when we're infected with this bacteria, we might not even realize it. I mean, you could be infected with this bacteria right now, if you're particularly promiscuous. Hey, no judgment. I mean, you could be infected because it can be asymptomous, or it can feel a little bit like this. That's right, we're talking about chlamydia. And what's interesting about chlamydia is that it can infect your genital tract or your eyes, or both if you're doing some really weird stuff. But you know who really suffers from chlamydia? You know who the real victims are? It's koala bears. That's right, over half of all koalas in Australia are infected with chlamydia, and it's really serious. These guys are cute, they're slow, they're lazy. They're one of Australia's only animals that's not trying to kill you, unless they get wet, then they get a little bit angry. But these little creatures are going blind and becoming infertile because of chlamydia, making it really hard for them to get it on and produce offspring. It's really sad. But what is interesting is that we actually have a vaccine for chlamydia, for koalas, but not humans. I mean, people are going around Australia, climbing trees and vaccinating koalas. But if you as a human go into a doctor's office and ask for a chlamydia vaccine, they can't help you. Crazy, right? Well, luckily the treatment for chlamydia is a simple course of antibiotics. And the key is to treat the infection before it causes any long-term damage. And to practice safe sex. I feel a bit like your parents at awkward age. You know how to use a condom, right, Jesse? Thanks, Dad. Now, finally, I want to talk about a couple of serious diseases that don't have effective vaccines. Let's start with malaria. Do you know what kind of pathogen malaria is? Is it a bacteria? Is it a virus? Well, malaria is actually a protozoan, a single-celled organism that is parasitic. So it infects our body and feeds off of our tissue. Now, I don't know if you know much about malaria, but it kills over 500,000 people every year. It has a mortality rate of around 20%, making it one of the most deadly infectious diseases for humans. Now, lucky for us, malaria isn't a problem in Canada or America. But if you're walking around sub-Saharan Africa or on a tropical island in Asia, you might want to protect yourself. So malaria is spread by the Anopheles mosquito because it mates in the mosquito gut. It then moves to the mouth where it can transfer into humans when the mosquito bites us. And the protozoan pathogen finds its way to our liver cells where it can grow before moving back into the bloodstream, where it multiplies before being picked up by another mosquito to repeat the life cycle. Now, if you're unlucky enough to get bitten by an infected mosquito, then you could come down with the disease. Fever, sweating, pain, and possibly even death await you. Luckily, malaria can be cured if you receive the appropriate treatment in time. Now, if you want to avoid malaria, you could get the malaria vaccine. It's called RTSS. And do you know how effective it is? I mean, after years of testing and trialing, this is the best vaccine we have for malaria. And it's about 35% effective. Just 35%. Turns out that creating a vaccine against protozoans is a little more tricky than viruses or bacteria. But don't worry, you can take anti-malarial drugs while traveling in malaria-ridden countries, and they prevent the parasite from surviving in our bloodstream. Just remember they're about as good as birth control. You know, pretty effective, but not perfect. So maybe wear long sleeves and use some mosquito repellent, you bloody idiot. Now, the last disease I want to talk about is currently the most deadly infectious disease among humans. Do you know what it is? Human Immunodeficiency Virus, HIV. It kills around 1 million people worldwide every year, and it affects millions more. Now, we have drugs to treat this disease, but we can't cure it and we can't vaccinate against it. And here's why. HIV evades our immune system by hiding within our immune cells. Over time, those immune cells die off and the immune system fails to protect the body from other infections. This leads to AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, and you start suffering from a range of infections because your immune system just cannot protect you. It's a chronic and brutal disease that is killing too many people, and it needs a vaccine. So let me just talk a little bit about vaccine development. Currently, vaccines contain proteins or haptens that mimic certain pathogens. We put them into the bloodstream and hope that the immune system finds the proteins and induces an immune response. For some vaccines, this is pretty effective, about 80 or 90%. Other vaccines is not so good, about 20 or 30% effective. I mean, imagine if you had the opportunity to get a pointy needle jabbed into your arm for a 20% chance that it'll protect you against a disease. You probably wouldn't do it, would you? Well, new vaccine delivery methods are being developed as we speak. Vaccine carriers that are nano-sized, targeted specifically to immune cells, and loaded with proteins that are highly specific to induce an immune response not 20 or 30% of the time, not even 80 or 90% of the time, but 100% efficiency. A guaranteed vaccine that will protect you against a specific disease. And as vaccine technology improves over the coming years, we'll be able to improve the efficiency of vaccines against all diseases, reduce the number of preventable infections, thereby reducing the number of preventable deaths, and we'll be able to create new and effective vaccines against evasive pathogens like malaria and like HIV. So, in conclusion, there are a lot of dangerous things out there, and some of them will make you sick, and some of them might even kill you. But thanks to science, we know a lot about these microbes, and we're getting pretty good at dealing with them. We have vaccines that will protect you against these pathogens, and we have treatments to help you survive these infections. Heck, we even have doctors going around injecting the most deadly toxin known to humans into humans. And we have researchers in Australia climbing trees and vaccinating koalas. It's 2019 and science is leading us into the future. Is there anything we cannot do? I strongly believe that as medical research continues, we will be even better equipped to deal with any viruses, bacteria, protozoans, or any other diseases that this planet throws at us. Thank you for listening. So there you go, guys. That was my first ever live science speech. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you learned anything, click the like button down below and let me know what you think about these infectious diseases and their vaccines in the comment section down below. Finally, my next few videos are going to be going a little more in depth into some of these infectious diseases. So make sure you subscribe for more traveling science every single week. I'll see you guys next Science Sunday. Cheers.